The history of Brazilian literature in the colonial period. The colonial period in Brazilian literature spans from the arrival of the Portuguese in 1500s until the opening of Brazilian ports to foreign nations in 1808. During this period, Brazil was a colony of Portugal, and literally, production reflected the interests of the colonial powers. The early works were written by European settlers, missionaries, and explorers, whose primary goal was to describe and document the newly encountered lands, people, and resources. Much of this early literature consisted of travel reports, religious texts, and correspondence directed toward the Portuguese crown.
Brazilian literature has a rich history spanning several centuries, with authors contributing to various literary movements. These authors and their works are among the most significant in Brazilian literature, each representing different eras, themes, and styles that reflects the cultural, social, and political evolution of Brazil. Iracema remains one of the most read and best-known literary works in Brazil, taught in all public schools. Isabel Burton, Richard Burton's wife, is the first one who translated Iracema into English under the title Iracema, The Honey Lips, A Legend of Brazil. Paulo Coelho de Souza is one of the Brazil's best-known writers and world's famous by now. His books have sold more than 225 million copies and are a source of inspiration on philosophical and spiritual questions for many readers. His breakthrough came in the early 1990s with his novel The Alchemist, which has been translated into more than 80 languages.
Brazilian literature is deeply influenced by the country's rich cultural and historical tapestry, shaped by its indigenous roots, European colonizations, African heritage, and its unique path to nationhood. The evolution of Brazilian literature can be divided into several key periods, each reflecting broader socio political changes. Indigenous traditions, oral narratives, myth, and legends from Brazil's indigenous peoples have been central to shaping the nation's literary identity. African heritage, the African diaspora, particularly through the experience of slavery, has profoundly influenced Brazilian literature, especially in the depiction of Afro Brazilian culture, religion like candomblé, and resistance. European literary traditions, from the Baroque to Romanticism, European genres and forms dominated early Brazilian literature, but were later adapted to express local concerns. Brazilian literature reflects the complex interactions between its indigenous, African, and European heritage, evolving to address themes of identity, social justice, and national consciousness.
Changes like increased wealth, urbanization, and the need of labor reform. Politically, the nationalism spread and the European states restructured with the unification of Germany and Italy and the rise of imperialism. Culturally, art and literature evolved with the movement like Romanticism, Realism, and Symbolism. The century also witnessed scientific advancement like the cell theory, law of heredity, and bacteriology revolutionized medicine and surgery. Romanticism and nationalism. Politics and culture, particularly literature, converged to create national state ideology in Brazil. All through pure subjectivism was produced by Romanticism. The patriotic idea of the motherland predominated. Domingo José González de Malgares, Suspiros Poéticos e Saudades, 1836, Poetic Sign and Nostalgias. A collection of personal and lyrical poetry marked the beginning of the Brazilian Romanticism in 1830 to 1870. Magalhães is also acknowledged alongside other scholars and authors. Antonio Gonçalves Dias is the most well-known poet of the Romantic and Indianist poetry. His poetry, Canção do Exílio, In 1843, Song of Exile, which expresses a profound longing for his native country, took on the form of a type of national anthem. Antonio de Castro Alves is another important poet from this era. He authored anti-slavery poetry, which was eventually collected in the posthumously released book Os Esclavos in 1838, or The Slaves, and O Navio Negrario in 1880, The Slave Ship.
Modernism began in the 1920s, rejected traditionally by Portuguese influence, focuses on creating a distinct Brazilian identity. Writers like Oswald de Andrade and Mario de Andrade explored the race, ethnicity, and cultural diversity, used the metaphor of cannibalism to symbolize absorbing foreign influence and transferring them into something uniquely Brazilian. Regionalism emerged in the 1930s, focuses on social and economic realities Brazilian Northeast region, especially its decline after the sugar boom. Writers like Gilberto Ferrer, Jocelyn de Rego, and Rachel de Quiros highlighted the marginalized areas and emphasized the poverty, injustice, and women's struggle in the practical society. Socialist writing. George Amado, a socialist writer, highlighted the struggle of the working class and the Afro-Brazilian community.